मुकुन्द माधव गोविन्द बोल केशव माधव हरि हरि बोल मुकुन्द माधव गोविन्द बोल केशव माधव हरि हरि बोल मुकुन्द माधव काना गुलाब को फूल किशोरी मेरी कुसुम कली मेरो काना गुलाब को फूल किशोरी मेरी कुसुम कली मेरो काना गुलाब को फूल किशोरी मेरी कुसुम कली मेरो काना गुलाब को फूल किशोरी मेरी कुसुम कली काना मेरो नंद जो को छोरा मेरी कुसुम कली, किशोरी मेरी कुसुम कली। पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. Everyone together. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Welcome to satsang. We'll start as always with a question that's come in advance. ये पंखा थोड़ा सा बंद कर देना ना, ये कम कर देना उसको. दूसरे वाला. हाँ. Yes. We'll start with a question that's come in advance and then open it up to any questions that anyone here may have. Yes, sweetie.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So could you talk about the obstacles that come up in the path when you're on path of karma yoga, on seva? What are the obstacles that come and then how do you overcome doership?
Great. Okay. So she said, can you talk about the obstacles that come up when we are on a path of karma yoga, path of action, service, seva, and how do we overcome that sense of doership? Well, there's a lot of obstacles that come up. The spiritual path is full of obstacles. They all come under the umbrella, though, of the ego. So, for example, the physical body is not an obstacle. It means there's some things I can do, some things I can't do. But you wouldn't say, well, my elbow is really an obstacle. All the obstacles that we have on that path come under the umbrella of ego. It's just different, more subtle manifestations of the ego. So we'll talk about those in a moment, but it's important to begin with realizing that as we talk about karma yoga, that path of yoga, union, through action, that it's not only through action. See, in the Bhagavad Gita and in traditional Indian spiritual philosophy, there's 3 different paths that are spoken about. There's a lot, but there's 3 main ones that are spoken about to unite with the divine, to have that full yoga. 1, Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of love and devotion. This is when you talk about practicing bhakti yoga, you usually see it in a variety of different ways of doing puja, chanting the names of God, singing to God, reading and reciting, and savoring the life stories of the divine. This is our path of devotion. And then we have Jnana Yoga, the path of wisdom. And typically we speak about these three paths: Bhakti Yoga, path of love; Jnana Yoga, path of wisdom; Karma Yoga, path of action. And I mention this because even though they are spoken about as three different paths, and throughout the Gita, Lord Krishna explains each of them as though it were the best. When he's talking about Jnana Yoga, he talks about it like it's the best way to God. When he talks about Bhakti Yoga, he talks like it's the best way to God. When he talks about Karma Yoga, he talks about it as it's the best way to God. What that awareness makes us realize, if in 700 short verses he's extolling the virtues of each of these, A, it makes us realize that whatever path works for you is the right path. But B, even more deeply, it makes us realize they actually all take you to exactly the same place. And this is important here when you're talking about obstacles of Karma Yoga, because if we try to pull Karma Yoga, or any of them, away from the others, it isn't full. And so here's what that looks like. You asked about karma, but let's begin by going in through bhakti, for example. So let's say that I'm practicing bhakti yoga, and I decide I'm only going to practice bhakti yoga. So I'm chanting the names of God, I'm singing to the names of God, I'm performing puja, different ceremonies to the different forms of the divine, reading the scriptures, full of love. I walk down the road, and in front of me somebody trips and falls. And I'm chanting my mantra as I'm walking, because you should always keep the mantra chanting. So I'm chanting the mantra as I'm walking, and the man falls. And I walk around him because I want to make sure not to lose the chanting of my mantra. Right? Now some of you already recognize the irony here. Here I am, so deeply engaged in a practice of exclusive bhakti that it has actually prevented me from seeing the truth. That same divine I'm singing to, I'm loving, whose puja I'm performing, whose name I'm chanting on my mala, in human form has just collapsed on the road in front of me. And I don't stop to help him. Because I'm only in the midst of bhakti yoga. Where there really is love and devotion, there is service. So if I begin with love and devotion, the guy falls in front of me, I'm going to stop and pick him up because I'm able to see that the same divine I'm worshiping in my prayers, in my chanting, in my meditation, in my puja, is in the form of this guy who's just fallen. And I'm going to help him. In the same way, if I begin with Gyan Yoga, path of wisdom, and I'm reading, learning all about the different attributes of God, and there isn't a spark of love in my heart for that divine I'm reading about, for that divine about whom I'm listening, then it's just academia. It's not Gyan Yoga. The word yog, or yoga, as most of us say in the West, means union, oneness, coming together. So whether I'm doing bhakti or gyan or karma or any of the other forms of yoga, it's all about union. And so bhakti yoga is not just devotion in a vacuum. It's union through devotion. Gyan yoga is not academic facts in a vacuum. It's union through wisdom, through reading the scriptures, through self-inquiry. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Through that, I attain that state of union. And so if I'm studying and I'm learning and I don't feel a spark of love, it's just academia. Now, Karma Yoga. Paulina, sweetie, will you turn this up just a little bit? Then I don't have to speak so loudly. Thank you. Thanks. Just turn it up a little more. Yeah. Just then I don't have to speak quite so loudly. They'll... Okay, good. That's good. Then I can be soft. So, in Karma Yoga, the path of service. But remember, it's union through action. Karma literally means action. And so Karma Yoga is union, oneness, connection through action. But that action has to stem out of love. That action has to stem out of wisdom. If I'm only acting and I'm not experiencing union, then it's just karma, but not karma yoga. And it still may be very beneficial and wonderful for the world. I may be doing great things. But in order for me, the doer of it, to benefit, in order for it to be a spiritual path, it has to be yoga, union. So how do I experience union through action? Because again, in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna emphasizes this so much. And in fact, he even says to Arjuna, you can't not act. We are all acting. How to turn that action into yoga? Well, the first piece, there's two essential aspects to it. The first is that I realize I'm not the doer. As long as I'm doing, there's no union. I have to realize I am simply a tool in God's hands. And here's a really easy way to think about that. In our brains, I think it's about 5 trillion neurons or some insanely huge, unfathomable number. If even one of those stops firing the way it's firing, I can't pick up this glass, let alone do anything of benefit for the world. If one of those neurons stops firing, my body could shut down, depending on which one it is, where it is. 1 out of 5 trillion brain cells fires incorrectly, stops firing, fires too much. Nothing we can do. Over. Same way, when you go to have dinner after satsang, and you put the food in your mouth, ask yourself whether, if your body didn't know how to digest it, could you figure it out? If you put that food in your mouth and you swallowed it, and nothing happened, like beyond what gravity does by pulling it down a little bit, nothing else happened. Could you figure out how to make it happen? Could you figure out how to make that food digest? Of course not. If I say to you, close your eyes and watch your breath for the next 3 minutes. We're just going to do a 3-minute meditation on the breath. None of you, unless you have a very good meditation practice, could actually make it 3 minutes without the mind wandering at all. That's like master meditator. If you can go 3 minutes without any wandering at all, wonderful. 3 minutes is nothing. But I mention it because if we can't even stay aware of our breath, who keeps us breathing? Even if I'm trying to meditate and I'm using all my faculties to be aware of my breath, and I still can't keep the mind from wandering. So who's breathing me? Who's keeping that breath going? Well, clearly not me. I can't even keep it going for 3 minutes. Because of course, every time your mind wanders, if nobody were breathing for you, you'd stop breathing. Who keeps it going? We fall into this gorgeous deep sleep in the night. Who wakes us up? So, even if we look at just the nuances of the physical body, there's nothing we're able to do. Even things you think you're doing, like, oh, I can sit down, I'll play the piano, maybe I'm an expert piano player. Well, that drama of being an expert piano player only works as long as someone is making sure all 5 trillion of my neurons keep firing. Because if not, there goes my piano playing. There goes everything. And so that sense of doership that comes over us is there only when we are in that ignorant sense of, oh yeah, there is something I can do. without realizing it's all grace. It's all grace that we're being used the way we are being used. And so that first essential element of karma yoga is realize I'm not the doer. And in that realization of not being the doer, it's a total surrender to God of that which is being done. I was just talking to Karuna and Julia today in the car as we were coming back, and I was telling them about how when I first met Pujya Swamiji, I was 25, had never met a spiritual master before. I had no idea what an enlightened master was like. And all I kept saying to him was, oh my God, you are so amazing. And he would say, it's all God's grace. And I would say, you are just incredible. I cannot believe that you, because aside from being magically enlightened, divinely enlightened, he's also the most phenomenal doer that I've ever met in terms of accomplisher of things. He has a vision, he has an idea, and boom, 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 boom. An encyclopedia of Hinduism, ashrams in Tibet on Chinese land, and medical clinics, and on and on and on, with so much humanitarian work. So many things were happening. Things that people said impossible, cannot be done. And so I would just constantly, gush. I'd say, my God, you are amazing. I can't believe it. And all he would say is, it's just God's grace. It's all God's grace. And in the beginning, it drove me completely crazy. I would say, yeah, but, oh my God, you are amazing. And he would say, it's all God's grace. And I would say, oh, stop, right, I get it. I know it's all God's grace, but oh my God, you are amazing. And finally, I realized that him saying that, it wasn't about just his sort of prepared, humble way of accepting a compliment. It wasn't that he was just being polite while it was driving me crazy. It actually was his felt sense, awareness, and truth of it's just God's grace. There was absolutely no sense within him of I as the one who have done. It was just I as a vehicle through which God's grace is flowing. And so he was just speaking his truth. And that's the first and most important aspect of karma yoga, is realizing doing is happening through me, but I'm not the doer. I'm being utilized. I am blessed to be utilized. The riverbed is blessed that Ganga has chosen it to flow in. The riverbed didn't create Ganga. Ganga has graced that riverbed with her presence. But in order to be an effective riverbed, it has to stay empty so that Ganga can flow in it. If Ganga tried to flow in the riverbed and it were already full, well, Ganga wouldn't be able to flow so well. But this is what happens in our life. So stay with the analogy for a moment. Imagine you are a riverbed. But instead of being hollowed out, empty, humble, completely absent of any sense of I, me, ownership, doership, ego, instead of being that, you're full. Well, there's no room for that river to flow through, but grace, divine grace is such that even if you're full, that river is going to try to cut through. And so this is where, when you say the obstacles of karma yoga, well, the obstacle is, here I am already full, and there is this divine river trying to flow through me. And so it cuts, and 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 it cuts into that not yet hollow riverbed, emptying us out so that there is space for grace to flow. And that's the part where, when we get on a spiritual path, when we get on a path with a guru, a path in which there is someone, I mean, the ego will do it anyway eventually, but if you've got a guru, if you've got someone who is showing you the way, there are these moments of feeling like something's hollowing you out. And that's when the obstacle feels like it's there. That's when it feels like, oh my God, this is painful. That's the metaphoric river Ganga. Metaphoric only in it cutting through us. River Ganga trying to cut through you in order to use you as the riverbed for her to flow. And so when grace is trying to flow through you, you've only got two choices. Either you hollow yourself out, or as that grace comes, it's going to hollow you out anyway. And this is when we talk about that pain of the annihilation of the ego, the pain of the attachment, the pain of identity, the pain of all of that. It's the pain of grace cutting through you to make more space for that grace to flow. And the other really important aspect of karma yoga is to realize that that same divine we love, because remember, as I began, you can't have karma yoga if there isn't a hint of bhakti, if there isn't a hint of love for the one you are serving. So to be able to see that one I love, to see that divine in the form of all those I'm serving. So it's not me serving you. It's not me as the one who has serving you as the one who doesn't. Me as the doer, you as the receiver. But rather, it's life flowing into life, self flowing into self, divinity flowing into divinity. And so as I serve, can I see that divine in those I'm serving? So rather than I'm doing this for you, it's you've given me an opportunity to see me in you. Through this service, I have yet another reflection of the same self. I have yet another opportunity of expansion to realize I'm not just this self, but I'm also the self over here. That's me. Yet another form. That's me. Yet another form. And as you pass each other as ships crossing in a night, you don't experience that. But as you engage with each other in karma yoga, whether as the doer and the recipient, the giver and the taker, the side-by-side doers, whatever role you're playing, karma yoga gives us the opportunity to see that divine in all. In bhakti yoga, I see the divine internally. I see the divine in an image, a picture, a murti I'm praying to. In karma yoga, I get to see the divine in all. Everyone I serve. And remember that service doesn't necessarily just mean I've ladled out some black bean chili into a bowl for you in a soup kitchen. Service is in how we breathe. It's in how we walk. It's in how we eat. It's in how we sleep. Service becomes not something we do on Saturday mornings once a month. It becomes how we live as those instruments in the divine hands. And so whether it's helping the guy who fell down in front of you, giving the smile to the one who needs it, giving your lunch to one who needs it, giving your money to one who needs it, giving your time to one who needs it, and all of that. Because sometimes it's time, sometimes it's lunch, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's experience and expertise. But when we live in service, when we live as karma yogis, every minute and every moment is an opportunity to practice that. Before taking a question that came in advance, I'm happy to open it up to any questions that anyone here may have. Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You have just not talked about bhakti yoga and all the different form of yoga, which basically states that there is a duality of the consciousness, where Krishna being the higher consciousness, Arjuna being the consciousness trying to reach that higher consciousness, and not being the concentric circles there. But then how do we reconcile with this philosophy, the concept of non-dualism of the consciousness, and of course, if you go into Shakdarshan, then how do we reconcile the darshan of Charvak and the darshan of Loka Yuga?
Okay, so without turning this into a esoteric philosophy talk, let's bring the question into what does it mean for us. So there's different schools of philosophy in Indian tradition. And he said, we've just spoken about these three different paths of yoga, three different ways into the river of yoga, the river of union, of oneness, of awakening, of enlightenment, of connection, whatever term we use. We've just spoken about the three different ways in. He said, but the path, for example, when we talk about Gyan Yoga, typically Gyan Yoga tends to be, not always, it's a general term meaning union through wisdom, but typically the way that manifests is in the study of what's called Vedanta, which tends to be rooted in a teaching of non-duality, Advaita, oneness. And the truth of Advaita says, there is nothing but God. Realize that for a minute. It's not one God. It's nothing but God. Absolute non-duality. There is no me and God. There is no lover and beloved. There is just God. But then, the path of Bhakti Yoga, for example, is rooted in duality. It's a path of love. And of course, it's very difficult to love oneself so much that tears run down your face. To love oneself so much that you just can't stop singing and dancing to yourself. It's not impossible, it's just somewhat more difficult. And so he spoke about these and other schools of philosophy that are rooted in either this non-dualist path or the dualist path. And how do we reconcile those? So think about the old television channels. Means the way that TVs used to work before we had remote controls, where you actually walked up to the TV and you would have to change a knob, and it would go 2, 4, 6, 8, right? And you would have different channels. In America, we'd have NBC and CBS and ABC, and you would turn them. Now, think about these different realities as different TV stations. Meaning, they coexist. I'm not talking about one channel, what's on from 7:30 to 8, then what's on from 8 to 8:30. I'm talking about coexisting simultaneously, broadcasting levels of awareness and levels of truth. And on one channel, which we're going to call the highest, truest, deepest channel, that's the Nothing But God channel. That is the ultimate truth channel. Nothing but God. And on another channel, we have this very beautiful human existence in which when someone falls down in front of me, I have the opportunity to bend down and help them up. Rather than just realizing, oh, that's an illusion. Because I could do that. I could stay only in nothing but God. That's also God. And I could learn to walk by starving children on the street and homeless people, saying, nothing but God, nothing but God, nothing but God. And I could learn to watch the news about people killing each other and women dying in childbirth simply because they don't have access to medical care. And I could say, nothing but God, nothing but God. And on some level, that would be true. But in order to live 24 hours in that awareness, I have to denounce that which makes me very human. Which is that thing inside me that starts to kind of do this when I walk by the children who are starving in the road. When I turn on the news and I see people killing each other. When I watch the Amazon burn. That there's something in me that just isn't buying the nothing but God, nothing but God, nothing but God. And I may buy it in my mind, and I may have even had extraordinarily beautiful moments of meditation in which I can feel it and I know it. And we should. Because that is the ultimate truth. And playing on this simultaneous channel over here is our human heart, which that same God who there is nothing but God has given us. Because we didn't come out of a manufacturing plant. We were created by a creator. However we envision the creator, or think about the creator, or call the creator, we were created. And there's no religious or spiritual lineage I know of that says God is imperfect. God can only do so much. God is finite. God has a limited number of molds. Right? God is infinite. That's what makes God God. And so if we've been created by an infinitely perfect creator, then that human heart is infinitely perfect. And the fact that it goes like this, sometimes like this, as I walk by people or see or think about who are suffering, my humanity is engaged in that moment. And it spurs me to want to act. And that's another way to know the importance of karma yoga, right? So it may not necessarily have come from a sense of, okay, that's going to be my spiritual path. I love God so much I'm going to serve God's creation. It may come from the heart going like this as I walk by people who are hungry or sick, or rivers that are being polluted, or trees that are being cut down. And so I act. And so that duality that's playing over here on channel number 2 is also true, also real. And here's a way to think about it. If you take the most enlightened masters of the dualist tradition, so you go to the Bhakti Yoga tradition, and you find the most enlightened masters of the Bhakti Yoga tradition, they know there is nothing but God on the highest, deepest level. But being in love feels so good. And to love God feels so good. And to love God enables us to love others in a deeper, fuller, purer way than we otherwise were able to. And so it's kind of this temporary suspension of what I know to be true, which is there is nothing but God, and a willing embracing of this other channel. Because to be the lover who's loving the beloved feels so much more exquisite than to simply try to live in the constant awareness, nothing but God, nothing but God, nothing but God. And it also doesn't require me to be cut off from my humanity. The path of dualism is a path that embraces the heart, that says, yes, yes, let that heart pump and beat and sing in love. Because if there's nothing but God, there is no lover, there is no beloved, there is just God. And while that is a very, very beautiful place to hit in meditation, for a brief or slightly extended brief while, until a thought comes in and it dissipates, Then you get it back for a brief while, then a thought comes in. It's a beautiful place to touch in our meditation. As I move through the world, it's a very, very difficult reality to hold on to. And it's one that tends to lead to indifference. If there's nothing but God, why bother? I mean, why bother saving the environment? It's all God, right? People who were cutting the trees down, the people who needed the trees themselves, it's all God. The rapist, the one being raped, all God. It's a very difficult way to move through the world without it turning into indifference and apathy. And that is not a spiritual path. Make no mistake. Indifference, apathy, disconnection, these are not spiritual attributes. These are the result of a mistaken adoption, a misappropriated, misadopted teaching of there is nothing but God in a vessel that can't actually hold that truth and move through the world at the same time. And so it turns into indifference and apathy, which is what it looks like when it comes through an unawake vehicle. And that's why we remember, oh, we have this other channel. So we have channel 1 when we're deep in our meditation. Channel 1 when we come back to ourselves. We close our eyes, we go within, there is nothing but God. Or if we're doing an open-eyed meditation, we're watching Ganga, we're watching the ocean, we're watching the stars, nothing but God. And then I stand up, and when the guy falls in front of me on the walkway, I pick him up. Because I'm just as happy to be over here on channel 2. In respect for and embrace of this human birth that I've taken by choice. Not to deny the human heart. Not to deny the human compassion and love. But rather to use them as tools in my awakening. So what that looks like is where most of our hearts only beat for 2 or 3 or 4, like my blood, those who are my family by blood or marriage. When that becomes a spiritual path, when it's a spiritual path of bhakti or karma, now that heart beats for all. Now it's service of all, love of all, not just my constricted sense of who is mine and who's not. And then it beats for all and serves all regardless of what they do. Because again, for most of us, it's I'll love you or I'll serve you as long as you love me and you're nice to me. As long as you appreciate me. When bhakti yoga and karma yoga really become yoga, union, it's when as paths to the divine, that sense of duality is something that I have chosen consciously. Even though I know on the highest level nothing but God, because I know the lessons I need to learn in this life, the sadhana I need to do in this life, the karmic knots I need to undo in this life, are going to be undone through love, through service, through selflessness, through two becoming one. Because remember, in Bhakti Yoga, it begins as two. Oh, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And then slowly it's love you, love you, love you. And then it's just love. Then the two become one. Ultimately, this is Mirabai, right? I love you, I married Lord Krishna. I love you, I carry Krishna, only Krishna. Ultimately, nothing but Krishna. I mean, she's the ultimate bhakti, who ultimately, literally merges into nothing but Krishna. But it begins with love you, 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 and then just love. There is no I doing the loving. There is no you receiving the loving. There is just love. Similarly, karma yoga. I'm serving you, I'm serving you, I'm serving you, I'm serving you. Until it's just service, which ultimately is love. I mean, karma yoga is bhakti yoga in action. It's bhakti yoga off of my puja mat. It's bhakti yoga in the world. And so we begin as two and we come together into oneness. And that oneness that I experience, having really come into it through the other paths, is an experience that stays with me much longer and is much more deeply grounded and rooted in my ability to move through the world than an awareness that I have in meditation, but I'm not able to hold on to. And look, think about it for a minute. How many of you have ever been in a relationship, a marriage, a non-married relationship, but a romantic relationship, in which you find yourself, consciously or unconsciously, fighting about things that you have no idea what they are, only because you were feeling a little bored in the relationship? Right? We instigate fights when we're feeling bored and stuck. Why? Not just for the good drama of it, but because here we were as one, married or unmarried, whatever, but we were one. We were two bodies, one heart. We were one. But now in this state of boredom, this state of kind of the fireworks are over, the passion has ended, now I'm just kind of bored in this relationship. So now one has become two. Now we're cohabiting. There's nothing actually wrong, but that excitement is worn off. So what do? We create a fight. Why? Because in that fight, we become even more separate, really two, over here. And in fighting and fighting, eventually we get to what? Make up. And when we make up, then two become one again. And in that making upness, we again have the experience of two becoming one. And a lot of that drama of the fighting is in service of re-experiencing two becoming one. And so in the same way, when we willingly, consciously, walk paths of bhakti yoga, karma yoga, it's saying, I am willing I know we're all one. I know there's nothing but God. And I'm willing and excited to walk this path of two. Because I know that by walking it sincerely, ultimately the two are going to become one. And that oneness is so beautiful. And so exquisite. And so everything. That it's worth living and walking a path of duality in order to again experience the two become one. Whether it's the lover and the beloved, the doer, the receiver, whatever any of these distinctions are, ultimately at the end, the ultimate path of bhakti, yoga, union, oneness, karma, yoga, union, oneness, is to come back together with the self, with the divine. And in that coming back, that's when that great joy of spiritual oneness is. That's when we talk about samadhi, that ecstasy, that bliss. It's coming back together. That's why samadhi is the eighth limb, the highest goal of yoga, of union. It's bliss. Two have become one. Bliss. So they may seem like two truths, but they're actually only one truth, but walked in two different ways. Have a beautiful rest of your evening. And as I mentioned last night, we unfortunately will not be having satsang for the next week. I leave tomorrow morning for Nairobi for a United Nations summit on population and development, specifically about women and girls and their sexual and reproductive rights, and their rights to be safe, their rights to be autonomous, their rights to be fully empowered. And it's a large international coming together of that. And so it's a great honor to go, and I'm excited to go, but we'll miss the banks of Ganga. We'll miss being here with you all. We'll regather for satsang beginning on the 17th of November.